Uh, Long time no see. How you doing?
Mr. Noel. Oh my gosh, all these familiar faces. Rebecca, hi. Katie, welcome. Hi. Richard is here in the house. Fantastic. All right. Stella, looks like we've got some dance partners.
We got some dance partners. Hello, hello, hello.
Fantastic.
And I think Vaishnavi, I saw that the recording's already on. Yeah, cool. All right. Welcome, welcome, everyone. We are delighted to have you here today for the culture of overcommitting, what leaders can do differently now. And let's see, I know there's a couple familiar faces here and a couple that are not. I am Stella Orange. I am a year one student in generative leadership. And I have the good fortune and honor of talking with founder of the generative leadership body of work, Bob Dunham, today. We originally were intending to also include my coach, Kim Frericks, in this conversation. However, Kim emailed us early this morning to say that there have been tremendous winds in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and that has knocked power out for, I think, 550,000 people and households. So she's camped up with her beloveds at a coffee shop. She said, I don't think I can call in today. So she sends her regrets. We shall press on, Bob.
Okay.
Um, and so, yes, we are excited today to have this conversation and I think really just learn from you, Bob, and also re-anchor in this perspective that generative leadership offers us about capacity and commitment
Mhm.
and taking
Beautiful.
care of what we care about. So
Yeah.
we are
Nice.
gathered here today, close to the end of the year, friends, at a time when for many leaders, coaches, consultants, we start to notice what has been done and what has not yet gotten done. And we might feel any number of ways about that. Um, and our team thought that it would be of service at this time of year to have this conversation about, Bob, what I've heard you talk about is the common sense of a culture that says, say yes to everything.
Oh boy.
Uh, and so what alternatives exist? That's what we're here to talk about. And to be clear, the generative tradition doesn't say this is about doing more with less, doesn't say this is about being productive for the sake of movement and action. It's really the offer here on the table is to look at what is around us with a new lens, a new perspective, a reframing, as it were, about what can we do if we or the teams that we're a part of or that we lead or support is finding themselves saying yes to too much and to the point where they can't get through what they're here to do. So I just want to do well, actually, I should start to say, hi, Barbara, welcome. Um, I want to just do a check-in with folks. I think the chat is open, Vaishnavi. We're curious here today to wonder, like, what is it about this topic that's feeling alive or of use to you in each of your contexts and your situations? You're welcome to write it into the chat. Just if there's something that comes to mind, or feel free to jot it down on a piece of paper for yourself. What is it about where you find yourself that has you interested in the topic of overcommitment and capacity? I agree. We're just going to be silent as you type this to yourself or to the rest of us, just to give you a chance to check in with why this topic is relevant for you.
Nice. More focus. Pervasive issue. Still? My God, we've been talking about this for a long time. How come it's still an issue? Yeah. Good. Good to see you, Carlos. Yeah, welcome.
Good to see you, Bob.
Yep. Fantastic. Epidemics and startups. Oh, that's a hot one. 6 out of 6 clients, huh, Greg? You're batting 1,000. Oh my God. This elevates the problem to the status of an epidemic, or the way we would talk about it, is a huge blind spot in our culture. That people keep falling into this hole. How should we proceed, Stella?
Good. Well, I'm just letting folks have a chance to pop in. So this is great. Feel free, if you haven't had a chance to express where you're at, to pop that into the chat. It seems to me that many of you already know and love Bob Dunham, but for those of you who might be watching the recording or who might not know who this beautiful man is, he's the founder of the Institute for Generative Leadership, and which he founded in 1993. It has affiliates in the US, Latin America, Asia, and the UK. Bob is the leading authority on generative leadership and generative coaching in organizations, and is co-author of the book, The Innovator's Way, The Essential Practices for Successful Innovation with Dr. Peter Denning. Excuse me. He also is a wearer of beautiful scarves, which we all.
Hey!
So thank you for that. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, Kim Frericks was scheduled to be a part of this conversation. We had a breakdown earlier this morning with the winds in the Pacific Northwest, which has knocked out power for a lot of folks out her way. So she sends her regrets. She's not going to be able to join us now. So Bob, where do you want to start? I had an inclination that we start in the generative tradition with definitions, and this contrast between what the common culture says and what the generative tradition says. But what's feeling alive and interesting to you in this moment?
I like that, but I think even a step before that is to say, why do we care about this?
Love it.
And why does this matter? I think from the comments in the chat, everybody kind of sees this has something to do with results, but it also has something to do with the kind of life we live, the kind of level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction, of success and failure. It's like, this is not simply a little technical problem that people need a technique for. This is like contextual. You live a life of overcommitment. Let me tell you a couple of stories from my life of why I care about this. One is that I was raised and developed myself as a young man to be a hard charger, go after big goals, work hard, dedicate, go, 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 go. And when I got into taking on an executive position, I gave it everything I had. And I went into clinical burnout as a result. What is clinical burnout? It took me a year to recover physically.
Wow.
From a period of time of overdoing, because I thought that's what was needed. You would have thought with an experience like that, I would have learned my lesson. But then I went and founded the Institute, and many years ago was trying to, in a phase where I was kind of the one pair of hands doing everything. Guess what happened? I kept doing what I thought was needed, and I burned out again. Another year of recovery. So it's a personal issue. And I'll tell you, when you're overcommitted and you're always feeling like you're under the threat of being behind, that's not a happy place to live. So it's a personal issue. It's a life quality issue. And if you're a leader or coach, it has to do with the quality of your performance, the impact you're having. Because when you begin to burn out, you're not doing your best. You may not even be doing well. I had another experience early in my career that should have taught me when I was doing this burnout as an executive. I was a program manager and then a vice president for 250 engineers, and looking back on it, I can learn the lesson that when you're in a challenging situation, or when you're in a high success situation, the world you're living in is unrelenting demand. People think that life is going to get easier and better when they succeed. No. People are going to be demanding more and more from you. And if you don't know how to say no, if you don't know how to manage your capacity, you're on the road to burnout. But the problem with the organization that I took over, that took me down that path, was exactly what you said, Stella. It was a culture where the only answer to a request from someone more senior to you was yes. And that was the culture. And people actually were afraid to say anything else. And while I was going through my personal overwhelm, I saw the problem. The problem, this was a computer company. They had developed, this was the early 80s in Silicon Valley. They developed an industry-leading data entry computer system that was pretty popular. But they had a problem. They had a problem from the Silicon Valley experience. They had developed this new product. It was successful. They were doing well, and they couldn't get a new one, another version out. When they handed the organization over to me, they had not gotten a new product out the door in 2.5 years. And there's a whole other story about beyond capacity, about learning to be a leader and dealing with a crisis situation. But I want to focus in on what was the problem. I had recently been introduced to what we now incorporate and build generative leadership on, which is that action is defined in conversations, always. You don't have a conversation, you haven't defined the action. And the point of the conversation is to generate the commitment that will drive the action, because action is not activity in a human being. It is commitment that then shapes activity. That's kind of the blazing new paradigmatic view that opened up the world. And so I was introduced to this perspective that you act not by doing something, you act by promising the outcome of what you're going to do. There's something that happens before the activity. And that really had it was a world-changing view for me, by the way. It's like, that's not where I thought you chatted with people and then got busy. And so this new perspective showed up for me, that the reason my organization exists, the reason I'm here, the reason my 250 engineers are busy is we have a promise to fulfill. And that was very revealing. I began to see immediately in my personal work that if my work is making and fulfilling promises, then I'm not doing a very good job if I promise what I can't fulfill. And I learned that if I didn't say no, sometimes I would be overwhelmed, I would be in crisis, and I would either be burning myself out, which happened a lot, or I would fail my customers. And so that was clear for me at the organizational level. So here I had an organization that said yes to everything. And that had so overwhelmed them and so paralyzed them. Whenever you followed up on any particular promise, they would always have the excuse, well, they had 5 other things. Nobody ever got the priorities clear because they said yes to everything. And so the conversations were screwed up, trust was eliminated, people were overwhelmed, people started leaving the company. This was a death spiral for the company. And from this new perspective, I said, oh, we're not making a promise we can fulfill, and nobody has the courage to say no. And so I got the request in the way the company, I got a request, a document this tall, this thick, of requests from sales and marketing of what they wanted the products to do. The old ritual was, okay, yes, and now let's suffer with the overcommitment. And I actually did something new. I went through this with my team and say, here's the priorities they've given us. What can we say yes to, and when do we run out of capacity to fulfill these requests. And so I said no. Sales and marketing didn't like it. And I had to have a little courageous moment. I say, well, if you want me to say yes, like before, you can continue to have nothing get delivered. And I insisted on you've given, I'm going to take a stand here. I'm going to promise what I know I can fulfill. And I had to teach my people to say no. I had to teach them to get over fear. I had to create a public place where we would negotiate, say yes and no, and count. I had to teach them how to have a conversation that was missing in the culture. But because I was their leader and because I was the promiser, I was in the nexus where I got to be in all the important conversations.
Mm.
And the result of that is we delivered what we promised. All 35 products on time, on budget in 6 months, 10 times higher quality than ever achieved before, because we managed the capacity. And so I had the breakthrough with the organization and utter disaster in my personal management.
I appreciate your humility, and also what a story. I'm curious about where you've been doing this a long time, Bob. Like, where do you start? Like, how do you start to move? I mean, there's a breakthrough in an individual, there's a breakthrough in a leader, there's a new way of seeing.
Yeah, nice.
And I've heard you, like, as a student of this work, I've heard you teach, and some of my other teachers in the program say, like, with new awareness comes new choices.
Yeah, you'd asked the question, let's define what capacity is. I'm going to come at it slightly different. We'll get back to that
Yeah, thank you.
question because that'll produce some rigor here in the game.
Okay.
This new paradigm that we've built a new discipline on starts with action is shaped by commitment. The most rigorous form of that commitment is a promise. And a clear promise is what's needed to be able to coordinate. Does this make sense to everybody? You following that logic? It's like,
thumbs up.
Yeah. It's like obvious when you say it, but it's like not where we've been paying attention because we thought action was about movement and activity.
Oh, Sharon, you've got a question?
I just was going to ask if you could say it one more time a little more slowly.
Wonderful.
I can do slow. So here's the principle. Action is shaped by commitment. Now, when we do our learning, we actually go and do exercises, and we feel this out. This is why we have programs. I mean, we have to learn how this actually works. Where does the commitment get created? Is the question. Okay, if action is shaped by commitment, well, how do you create the commitment? Well, it's created in conversations. So if I ask you to do something, Stella, I'm committed that something happens here. And you could say yes to me and overcommit, possibly, or you could say no to me, or you could say, Bob, I won't do what you ask, I'll do something else. But in that interaction, what we're looking for is what can you and I agree on? Where can we be on the same page? So the first thing I found was missing in my organization is people weren't taught that they could say those things. The only response on the menu was yes. And so, no, you got to, here's one of the discoveries we've made over the decades. If you can't say no, you can't trust the yeses. If people say yes to everything, you know it ain't going to happen. So people have got to have guidelines. When is it appropriate to say no? And in our learning over this span of time, we found no is the right answer when it produces a better result than a yes. Because a yes that's overcommitting is disaster. And it turns out that probably 95% of the time you don't say no, you say, well, I'm going to decline what you requested, but I could do something else. in that search to get on the same page. Now, when we come to the point of agreement, what's an agreement? It's a commitment. Saying, I agree to this. I will act according to this. And here's the power of this point of view that we talk about is two questions about an agreement. Number one is, are we really on the same page? Is what you think the agreement is and what I think the agreement is the same? And so we learned a lot about getting clear, having the language be clear. Because a lot of agreements are really sloppy and just lead to trouble. So first of all, are we on the same page? Second question is, can we trust it? Got an agreement, can we trust it? Just because someone says yes doesn't mean you can trust them. And someone who overcommits and doesn't deliver does not make trustworthy agreements. So from that point of view, you begin to see what I had to train the team to, how we need to change the culture. We went from saying yes to everything to saying, what trustworthy agreements can we make? And where do we run out of capacity? Where if we made an agreement, we would be creating a problem. And that's what we did. And when we go to cultures of overcommitment, where people are afraid to say anything but yes, or where managers, here's what we've learned over our decades doing this. Managers are often trained to the wrong principles. One principle of management that many managers are not, like, my job is to make them do what I want. And that often leads to overcommitment because people then feel bullied and afraid. That's actually not the job of a good manager. That doesn't produce a good manager. What produces a good manager is, I want to get promises we can trust that meet a professional standard. If we do that, we'll succeed. And so you see, it's a different perspective. It's a different focus. But it's a skill of a human being. It's not just a procedure. You can't proceduralize this. You have to have people who can see and think and feel what's going on in the conversation. That's what we've learned in the generative, that creating action, trustworthy promises, and managing commitment are professional skills. And it requires the human being to be aware of being able to make those judgments. And that takes us to, what is capacity? It's a judgment. It's a skill of judgment. Can I do this or not? Do I have enough time to do this or not? And we not only have the problem of the organization culture that says you have to say yes, we also have even more prevalent in our experience is the lack of being introduced to the responsibility and skill of managing capacity. So a lot of people overcommit because they're not very good at assessing whether they can do something. And then when they don't deliver, they're saying, yeah, but I'm so overloaded. You should be thanking me for how hard I'm working. And you know what? Customers don't care. They didn't ask you to work hard and sacrifice. They asked you to deliver what you agreed to. That's the standard for professional. You see, now, hopefully, are we getting some clarity here, everybody? Are you, like, is this making sense? Then the challenge we found is not the clarity, because we've kind of unraveled this. It's getting people to overcome old habits, overcome their fear, to be courageous when it needs to be. And I was lucky in my executive role that I was able to be the person that said, this is the standard that we're going to follow for the entire organization. So I gave a space for people to try these new conversational skills, but they had to learn them. And I wound up finding in my project review meetings that at the beginning, I spent probably half the time teaching them how to have the conversation. But once they got it, we learned fast enough that we had the breakthrough in 6 months. So that's why I'm here. This thing worked. And
Again,
even though I have what is that? Burn marks all over all over me from having walked through the fire. I'm sorry, Stella, go ahead.
no, trophies.
Trophies, all right.
Again, I'm curious about like in the story that you've just shared from your own experience or from what you've seen in the organizations that you've consulted with since that time for yourself. Like, how do you think about where to start? Like a lot of folks in the chat are talking about what they're witnessing and observing and assessing of being a culture of overcommitment.
Yeah.
Or a place where, to your own estimation, where people don't feel safe to say no, or haven't even like it hasn't been presented as an option. Like,
Yeah.
where does a generative practitioner begin to like get their bearings inside of that sort of situation?
Well, I'm going to give a first answer, and then I'm going to invite some interaction here. Where you start as a practitioner, you can either be an internal leader trying to make a difference in the culture, or you can be a coach or consultant from the outside trying to make a difference. What gets people to listen? What gets people to listen is say, I can help you with your problems. I can help you with your pain. I can help you with your failures. Would you like some help? I'm not here selling something. I'm not here to, have you do my thing. I'm here to say, we have an approach that has been proven. It's 40 years it's been proving itself. It works. And it's probably unfamiliar to you. You probably don't know what this is about. But if you're open, here's the evidence. Here's the results we've had in the past. And in the same way I'm talking here, here's how the approach would work. Now, if you're open, we've seen that these turnarounds can happen in a 6 to 12 month time frame at the level of an entire organization. But it's only going to happen if you're committed to do what works. And then we got to get our agreement clear. And I was fortunate when I was doing it internally. I had a role where I got to be the leader of the organization. And when I went on to a full-time consulting career later, I didn't sell people. I just said I let their pain and their problems sell them. You can either have a different future, a different situation, or you can continue to have it the way it is. What do you want?
Hmm.
And I'm happy to go through the conversation to demonstrate why this is effective, why you can trust it. I'm gonna ask here about how do you start in an organization? I'm gonna ask Greg Carl, the CEO of IGL, who actually put in the chat his last six clients were infected with this virus. So, Greg, can you take on the question here? How do you start?
Oh, he's having computer issues, no sound.
Oh my God, Seattle and Colorado are both doing gremlins. Okay.
Well, we do have a couple questions, Bob. I don't know if you'd be game for that. And Greg, I don't know if it's going to come back. No. Okay. Well, we shall see. All right. It's being created before our very eyes. We do have some questions, Bob, as people are taking in what you're saying. Like, does it start with the leader or supporting a CEO to assess, hey, this is a culture that's not working for the organization, and doing that, walking that precarious line where you're not shutting the CEO doesn't go into shutdown mode? Or is it more effective, you find, to kind of stay and working with the folks like managers and other leaders, not at the top level? Like, what have you seen? What's your insight there?
Yeah, I've had to do both.
Okay.
It's kind of situational. It's not a rule.
Perfect.
You got to, when you identify the problems and open the conversation, we can help you with these problems. Um, and you look around and say, who's interested?
Hmm.
And if the senior leaders are interested, then you can start with them and then go forward. Often the senior leaders are busy, or they're got other crises to deal with, or not uncommonly, they're just this is not our problem, it's just our incompetent team. You go fix the team. Which is also, when that is said, you know where the problem is, and it isn't with the team. It's with the leader. But they may not be open at the beginning. And so what you do is you say, how can we begin to have the teams manage what the way we talk about is manage your promises, manage your capacity, which means you have to have the negotiation phase. Now, when people feel that that's a sign of disloyalty, you have to be ready to have your argument in the negotiation show why it's going to have a better outcome. And usually the track record of burned out creators in the past. So do you want to continue that game, or do you want to try something new? And that usually buys you a leash. When I first started to do this stuff, I talk about being executive. When I first started to do this stuff, I wasn't an executive. I was a program manager. I became a VP later. Program manager, I was responsible for driving the planning and execution of these 250 software engineers, but none of them reported to me. And when I look back at that, that breakthrough that I described, I did it as a program manager. And then we did it again later as when I was a VP. So how did I get stuff to happen when they didn't report to me? This is, a lot of people say, well, they don't report to me, I can't make anything happen. And I found out, yes, you can. Two reasons why you can. Number one, agreements are personal. They're not some technical thing that you write into an email and forget about. They're personal. If you're making a promise to me, this is personal. And so I said, I'm counting on you. I wasn't threatening. And I said, where I got trust was helping them negotiate, where they were going to say no, because then they trusted me but I said, once we agree, we got to go all out to make it happen. So let's make sure we're making the right promise. And so I was able to see the power of conversation that wasn't just the power of position, the power of the agreement itself. The second I learned was, as the program manager, nobody reported to me, but everybody I was working on, their boss's boss was my boss. So my boss was the customer of their boss. And so I learned that agreements only work when you take the customer seriously. And so even though they didn't report to me, I said, we're making agreements, but if this agreement doesn't work out, if we don't get on the same page and you don't take it seriously, then I'm going to talk to my boss, who's going to talk to your boss, who's going to talk to you. Now, how do you want to play? And you know what? I never had to do that. People took me seriously because they had a customer that I represented. And so those were kind of the two moves. The other thing I'll say in that particular experience is I did take a stand. I did take some fire. I did have to consider they may fire me over this. And I said, you know what? If they fire me over this, it's not a place I want to work anyway. So I just took a stand. We've been failing for 2.5 years. Don't encourage me to continue that. I'm bringing something new. And if you're going to let me give it a shot, then let me give it a shot. And we succeeded. We dramatically succeeded. We not only delivered on time, on budget, with higher quality, the rate of people leaving the company was cut down by 75% because they begin to see that this was a civilized place to work in a place where success could actually happen. How are we doing, everybody? Making sense? I tell you, when I first was introduced to this body of work, it was surprising and a little weird that I was told that all this was driven by conversation, because nobody told me conversations were important. The common sense of the culture at that time was, let's stop talking and get to work. We're wasting time if we're just talking.
Mm.
And then I learned, no. All the action is defined in the conversation. So you just need to learn how to have the right conversation. There's a lot of wasted conversations. I agree. A lot of meetings are worthless, but not when you know what an effective conversation is. We call those effective conversations generative. That's why we use the word generative. You generate the results that matter. There are conversations that do that, and there are conversations that don't. So, how we doing? Got another question?
I might just turn it over to our folks that are listening and hear if
Awesome.
there are questions, or just what's sparking as you're listening to Bob and thinking about your own context, your own situation. Like what are you receiving? What's kind of popping for you as you're listening and taking in this information? It sounds like some of you have been in this conversation with Bob for a while. Maybe others of you are newer, but if you would be willing to share it in the chat, we'd love to hear it. And Bob, maybe you can just kind of share your thoughts based on what's appearing for.
Sure. Yeah, this is we're exploring here. I want you to be able to walk out with of this conversation with a perspective of something new you can do to help people not be in the overcommitted, the circles of hell of overcommitment.
Could I ask you to comment or talk a little bit about micromanagement and how
sure.
to help people make some progress away from that?
Yeah. So, micromanagement, I'll tell you my experience with it, Sharon. Thank you for the question. Micromanagement is a name that people get to where you're telling me what to do at such a level of detail. You're showing that you don't trust me. You don't trust my competence. And it's very irritating. I want to have some room here to show what I can do. And micromanagement tends to be a style that we found in our 40 years of doing this stuff, a style of people who are very, very good performers. They're expert. They're probably excellent at what they do, but they don't know how to manage. They don't know how to coordinate. And so what they default to is, I'm going to tell you what to do just as though I was doing it, because that way I feel I'll get a good result. But it results in resentment. It results in people not taking ownership. It results in people not growing. And it usually results in your top performers leaving. It's not a good style. And so let me give the opposite approach and then talk about what to do with the micromanager. So the opposite approach is we're asking people to make promises as professionals. This takes us to Stella's question of how do we define things? So what is a professional? In our framework, we found the most relevant definition of professional is someone who can make and fulfill promises that satisfy customers. Now, if you can't do that, then you need to be supervised. Then you need to have someone who is competent to make and fulfill promises direct you. And so there's a role for supervision. But when people are supervised for a long time, they usually get very, very competent. They don't need to be supervised anymore. And then they can be treated like a professional. So this is about letting people grow into their skill set. And then if one of our conversational frames, Sharon, is about what are the conversations of teams. People want to have a future to grow into. That's what everybody wants. And part of being an effective team is to have conversations that include, what are you growing into? And the standard of professionalism, if people already are competent to do certain things, then the job as a manager is to coordinate the agreements, not to tell them how to do it. If they do need training on how to do it, give them that training and then treat them as a professional and let them do it. So how do you help the micromanager? The micromanager is someone, in my experience, who's simply never been shown a different way to think about it. They actually don't know how to manage. They actually don't know what these conversations are, and they're just doing the best they can. And usually they're worried because they have high standards, and so they need to be introduced to the possibility of their own growth. You see, when you're stuck at the level of your value is your performance as a performer, you'll never grow beyond that. Because the performance of a leader or manager is to make promises that you don't perform individually. It's getting the team to perform. It's getting others to perform without having them trapped inside your expertise. So this is often a challenge for people that have been promoted for the first time into a team leader or manager role, in our experience. And it's a big deal, because not only do they have to see this new approach, they have to go through the discomfort and learning over. So they need to be supported and helped and coached over time. I'm going to show you something, one of our basic moves of what learning feels like and what we need to know to help people learn. It's actually in the body. It's not about understanding. Everybody, this is an exercise we're going to execute here. Take your hands and clasp them together. Now, I want you to see that everybody feels comfortable, right? You just did something that you know how to do. It's really comfortable. You've done a lot. Now, turn them the other way. Does that feel different? A little less comfortable? Learning would have me do it differently. I don't like that. I'm going to go back to I'm going to give you the real hit here. Cross your arms. Now, if you can, cross them the other way. How does that feel? For most people, it's like, yikes. I hate it. I'm going to go back to the old way. This is the learning challenge in the body. You cannot have people learn in a performance art. Management, leadership, and teamwork are performance arts. They're not concepts that you pass a test with and get a certificate with. You've got to do them. And in order to change your habits, and this was triggered by Sharon's question with the micromanager, when you start to put them in this new approach, it's going to feel like crossing the arms the other way. And so we have to be trained to help people change bodies and comfort zones and deal with fear and doubt and trust, because this is new. And that's what we found is crucial. And so I was able, in my Silicon Valley story, to train my team because we were doing the practice in our team meetings. I was showing them how we were going to do these new conversations. And within weeks, they began to be able to play. That was a good example of a top-down success. Cool. Other questions?
I want to be mindful of time, Bob. So we might have a couple more minutes for questions, and then we're going to dance along. So,
awesome.
Yeah. Is there one more question that's popping for folks?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mark.
These are kind of perceptions, Bob. I'd love for you to speak to the idea that, publicly traded companies may struggle to do this due to, pressure from maybe Wall Street projections. And or what I also wonder about in my own head is about the American cultural discourse of more, grow, 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 not asking the question of what's enough to be satisfied. And I know this is esoteric, but do you have any reaction to that or thoughts to?
Yeah, big time. The way that companies succeed on the stock market is to fulfill their promises. Why the hell wouldn't you want to make a promises you can trust? And so any company that's squeezing their staff to overcommit in the hope that they're going to fulfill their promise is playing a game that I would not trust a senior executive to be responsible for. So this is not incoherent with a publicly traded company. I think it's actually more right down the line of how they want to manage themselves in the market.
Makes sense.
But your comment on more, I talk about as the more monster, because this habit of our culture that more is good, and if you're not doing more, you're not good, is do you know that in the biological domain, the creatures that exist on more are cancer cells? They never stop. They never blend with the ecology. They just do more and they kill everything around them. More is insane. It's a form of insanity because you will never have enough. You will never be satisfied, and you'll always be tempted to go over commitment. So you said the magic word. How much is enough? How much is enough to be healthy? How much is enough to be satisfied? And contrary to what some people may argue, that is not against growth. I have huge trees in my backyard. I'm looking right now. They grow every year, but I don't think that they're going to grow more because I go out there with an axe and say, if you don't grow 10 feet this year, I'm going to chop you down. There's healthy growth, but growth that has to be coherent in the tree itself, coherent with the surroundings. And the stupidity of more is we're going to grow no matter what, when in fact, maybe you should stop doing more of that and go somewhere else and do something new and innovate rather than more. More is, in my experience, is the most primitive, stupid strategy there is. It burns people out, and they're so tired and worn out, they can't do the real job, which is you're going to have to innovate, because more is not solving the problem. More is a tranquilizer. If we just work hard, we don't need to think and face the real challenges here. So more doesn't have a lot to recommend it as a context. We want to make bigger promises to have more value, not more stuff, more activity. And value, sometimes you get more value with less. As I try to clean out my closet, I'm learning that lesson.
Oh,
Thank you.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I said thank you.
With that, Bob, I think, and friends, we're going to begin our wrap up. And Bob, I do want to give you an opportunity to give a last word from this conversation today, but I'm also wondering if you might like to speak a few words on the subject of innovating and doing something new. The January Foundations of Generative Leadership is coming up.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah. No, that's
3-day
great.
training for folks to take this conversation if you're looking to do more with generative leadership. So I'm wondering, can you speak to that? Like what is Foundations about? Just in a couple sentences.
Well, as I shared from my Silicon Valley experience, I was doing learning at that time with a teacher who was drawing from philosophy to do a whole new framework of what is action and how do human beings take action and make things happen. And so I wasn't just a new smart guy, good leader that did that. I had a new framework. I had a new perspective. I could have never done that in my old common sense. And so we support people who are dealing with these issues and want to grow their impact as leaders or coaches of leaders or in organizations. Our programs are designed to do that. And the FGL stands for Foundations of Generative Leadership. It's a 3-day workshop. It's been refined for literally over 30 years and continues to evolve at the edges. That allows you to not simply we have conversations like this, we do breakouts and talk about how, but we bring in what has been proven to be these paradigm shifting new perspectives that allow people to actually see fundamentals in a different way, because the big breakthroughs don't come with new content, new tools. The big breakthroughs comes by changing the context. And I use the historical example of Pasteur discovering germs. That wasn't just a new tool. That changed what the world of health and medicine was all about. You had to learn to think in a new way. You had to learn new practices, new behaviors. And that's what we're doing with leadership. And so the FGL, the invitation is, we've designed it. It's a Friday, Saturday, and then the following Friday. And it's a 7-hour day on Friday. We do 5 hours on Saturday, so you still get some Saturday time. But then you have a week to chew on and practice with what we've introduced. And then the last Friday, we're still introducing new stuff, but we're kind of putting the core foundational new perspectives together that then allow us, it's the beginning of a 1-year program that we also offer, that then takes all this perspective and reconstructs, changes what is leadership, what is management, what is a team, and you reinterpret, how do you manage promises? How do you manage capacity? How do you manage emotions and moods, which is a whole nother conversation we can have. How do you handle breakdowns? How do you create value? These sound like nice themes, but we've made them concrete. Our generative framework says there's a conversation that actually does that. You just have to learn it, and then you have to go practice it. And so our programs are practice-based. And what do you practice with? With the commitments you have in your actual life and work. We're working on your real life, your real work, not on a passing tests in a course. We don't have a test for you to pass. We just have your life results is all we're working with. And so if this is of interest to you, you want to learn more, talk to us. It's what I'm all about, because I shared my breakthrough story, but we have graduates, lots of graduates with these breakthrough stories. And it's like, it's not some tips and techniques. It really is a new context, and it's at the level of a new profession. So it takes time to learn and practice, but it works. And it's just not popular now. AI is popular. You know that's coming. You don't get to avoid that. And I just wish generative leadership was unavoidable, and so that people would learn. What makes generative leadership work is that it makes you a better human being. It's not just about action and results. It's also about, what does it take to live a good life? That's a context for leadership we found it's often missing. Leadership is often like, how can you do more and sacrifice yourself more? That's not what we do. We do, how can you do more and create a good life as a context for it. So you're invited. It's, let's see, the dates are January 10th and 11th and the 17th. And then you're welcome for the 3 days, and you're also invited to talk to us about what are the promises we make that you can trust. for the following year. And that program will kick off on January 20th. And be a great journey. You'll have a personal coach, you'll have a learning team, you'll be working on real projects. It's a great way to really empower yourself in a new worldview. So you're all invited.
Is
Thank you.
this virtual or in person?
It's virtual now. We're getting more comments like yours, Mark. People want the live thing, and I'm looking forward to it. We've been talking about next summer. I would love to be in a room where we can really be face to face. That would be awesome.
Fabulous.
This one will be virtual.
So there will be more details on this in your email inboxes shortly. So if you're interested, you can take a look there.
Awesome.
Bob, as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for being a teacher and I would say a steward of this work. And I also am moved to thank your teachers and the folks that taught you as well. It's quite amazing to witness this group of people that have brought this work forth. And I'm sure that you have also, as you indicated earlier in the conversation, have learned so much from your teachers too. So I just want to take a moment to appreciate and acknowledge the teachers, of which you are one of mine. As we wrap up today, I'm also wondering, is there a last word on this subject of overcommitment capacity that you want to speak into the space or leave us with as we part ways from this gathering today?
I'll invite you to a practice that maybe you're already doing or maybe you've already figured out. Capacity is a question that comes up every moment that you commit yourself. And so when I first started to work with this, I tuned myself up to become awake and aware whenever I was making a promise, including to myself. And I would simply append this question to it. Do I have the capacity to fulfill it? Because sometimes we don't ask that question. We say, oh, sure, yeah. And then we get ourselves in trouble. I also found a very simple practice that almost no one does. Every time you make a promise, put the time of fulfilling it into your calendar. And guess what? You'll see when your calendar's full.
Tom feels you.
So those are two things that are very simple, but it also shows the real challenge of this new cross arms that you actually have to learn to train your attention. And that's a lot of what our program's practice space, and it's all about getting the attention where it needs to be. Then you got choice. That's it.
Just that. Thanks to you all for being here today. We very much appreciate it. Thank you to Bob and the Institute for Generative Leadership. We will see you down the road, fellow travelers.
Thank you.